told that, majority of us is still cooking. So if you need to take breaks to go out and have a drink of water or have some more electrolyte, then okay?
Oh. I'm just wondering if he's open to it. I want to jump into a circle. And then I can figure out what I'm going to do. Yeah. Brain's going, where we're going to, because I think in that first morning it was just like a bit of everything skim. Now it's like, now where do I start? I suppose this next one, we'll do it more like a Q&A, question and answer. And if you have questions, we'll just bounce with it. Because then that way you get what you want out of this afternoon versus me trying to go shoot wide and hope that you get it. 9 times out of 10, what happens is there's someone that's sitting in every one I've been into, someone will end up coming up to me, you didn't talk about this. It's like, wow, yes, I spoke about everything else, but that. What that means is they were waiting for something that they wanted an answer for, and then they didn't ask that question, hence it never went down that wānanga and then come up after and then want another wānanga about apartheid, and it's acknowledge the space, the not reclamation, it's reigniting the fire of our Maramataka. It's there. It's just how do we whiri that or hono that all together. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think of apartheid, something that you want to get out of. How much time do we have in this one? And we got hour-ish. And there might be a little bit extra to. And so if you have a question, there is no dumb question, I want to put it that way, because you might have a question that someone else already is thinking it, but that's not a cool question. Every little question, man. So I want to make sure that I can give as much as I can before I go home. Kapai? So we might just go around in a circle, and if you don't have a question, you can just say pass. And then we'll just go around. That way it's shared evenly. And so while I'm talking, just think of something, and we'll start over here on the left and we'll go around. And if you don't have a path, I just go, yep. Until when someone comes with a question, then we can answer that. It might just end up going right round, then back to you again, and then right round, and back to you. But at least everyone is given an opportunity to ask something. Kapai? Then that way I can say, man, I gave you like 20 chances to ask that question. Nah, just having you on. So Kapai, we'll start over here with Chikane.
Just thinking around Wairarapa with our tangata, and you working in with our mate. In terms of Maramataka, do you see certain patterns even if it's mental health or student? You know how we talk about energy and going highs and lows, and there's certain times with the Maramataka where our whānau are most vulnerable or most in the best parts that you might see. Because you're in Hawaii.
Well, I think, that's a nice big question. It's a good one. Patterns. I think, well, to answer that, about 10, losing track of leaving my mark, must be about 8 or nearly 10 years ago, 8 or maybe 9 years ago. Was it 8ish? Well, 8ish years ago, we started, and I think why we did it is that we put all the data and worked with the Coronial Service to put it into Maramataka and to have a look at indigenising the mātauranga, because we use a whakatauki that we borrowed from the First Nations, where it goes, mā te tikanga kia ako, mā te pono kia marama, mā te pūrākau kia maumahara. And what they're saying is, this First Nations probably was, teach us the facts and we'll learn, tell us the truth and we'll understand, but tell us a story and we'll remember that forever in our hearts. And so what we did is we wanted to tell the narrative in a different way. And so when we did it, we would look at little pockets because there's not much data there. And we observed, every year it shifted. So everyone was said, it was Whiro, it was when it was the highest. But then in another year it was Tamatea and vice versa. And so what ended up happening is that people then said, the moon causes this. We never said it caused that. What we wanted to do was look at the marama and use Mātauranga Māori as what does it cause it? Not to say it caused it, but what was the patterns that come from it. And so when people, you might hear like, the moon made me, because of the moon I did this. It's this phase I did this. It was like, no. It wasn't meant to be used as a tool or weaponization of justifying why you stole that car. It was more so that we could identify the phases and what was the story in that. And so often when I'm listening to a lot of the wānanga around our rangatahi, and especially our boys, and they were in the homes, they'll start telling me the story of the behaviour of these rangatahi, of these young men. And then I'll go, what was it around this date? And they're going, when did they have a look? Yeah, it was around this date. And I said, how about on these 2 nights, perhaps? And they go, those are the 2 nights the guys, the young men in the prisons were off the record. And I said, that's our tamatea phase. And so tamatea, a bit of a kōrero, there's many different kōrero around that. And, I spoke about it earlier, that tamatea meaning the fire nights. And tamatea, it was James Webster and I were over in Kaikoura. And we thought, let's go and take off to the hot pools. So we shot off over to Hamner Springs. I was just lying there in the spa, just having some time out in the middle of winter. And I looked at the name, and it said the Māori name. You know the Māori name for Hamner Springs? The Māori name of Hamner Springs is Te Whakatākaka o Te Ahi Ngārehu o Tamatea. And I was like, And I had another look, and it said, this is the flames that landed here when Tamatea did the karakia that lit the skies up red. And I'm talking about Tamatea Urihaia, Pōkai Whenua, Pōkai Moana. And Tamatea Pōkai Moana was down in the mountains of Uenuku. And so you got Panamata Hoa Uenuku is all the mountain ranges around Kaikoura. And I was like, Uenuku, Tamatea, started like, okay, there's some bit of an intermingling of names here. And what that meant was that when Tamatea got hit by a snowstorm and a blizzard into Waipounama. And so Tamatea left there was there and recited the karakia of Ngā Toitarangi. And Ngā Toitarangi, if we're familiar with Ngā Toitarangi, was the tohunga on the waka o Te Arawa. And when Ngā Toitarangi came through and he was blessing doing all his karakia and rituals through Tū Whare Toa, got up to Ruawahia, and there got into a fight with another, depends on who's telling this narrative, but with a nice atua. One of those nice atua's name is called Uenuku. And another one is called, not Ohoata. Yeah, Uenuku. And was battling this atua. Then Ngā Toitarangi did a karakia to Ngā Toitarangi's sisters, who were the keepers of fire. One was called Te Ohoata and the other one was called Te Pupu. And so they came down from Hawaii and popped up, and they ended up in Whakaari. Then from Whakaari, they ended up in Tarawera. Tarawera, they ended up in Rotorua, and then until they arrived at Ruapehu, and it was the flames that Ruapehu, that they, Te Pupu and Ohoata handed over to Ngā Toitarangi to defeat this ice atua. So Tamatea was down into Waipaunama, did that same karakia. And what they're talking about, the red lights, is that when Tamatea did that karakia, Ruapehu shot a red flame out of Ruapehu, and it flew and landed down and lit the skies up red, and landed down in Hamner Springs, and that Opetawa that where Tamatea lived, and were able to be saved. And so when we talk about Tamatea, we're talking about red nights, the fire, but there's also, that's the connection of Ruo Moko and where the fire came from through Ruo Moko. So when we look at Tamatea, it has a connection to Ruo Moko. The other one that Tamatea is also, what we're talking about, is also connected to Tāwhiri Mātia. And Tāwhiri Mātia being the atua wind. And so when you look at the pūrākau of these atua, these two atua are what we call a mata ngaro. And mata ngaro meaning the lost ice. And what I mean by that is when Tāwhiri Mātia fought and was all the atua and eventually defeated by Tū Mātaonga, that Tāwhiri Mātia's name then transitioned. And then, so Tāwhiri Mātia, so not transitioned, Tāwhiri Mātia, in Tāwhiri Mātia's disappointment, ripped out Tāwhiri Mātia's eyes and and threw them up, and then they became known as Mataariki. And so when we learn and look at these whakapapa, and the other one is when Ruo Moko, being the pōtiki of the whānau, was when Ruo Moko came into existence. Ruo Moko was then buried, or was placed under Papa Tūnuku, and became kāpō as well, wasn't able to see. So between Ruo Moko and Tāwhiri Mātia became known as two atua that were blind. You can't see them, but you can feel them. So you can't see the wind, but you can feel its impact. You can't see an earthquake, but we feel the impact of the earthquake. So our Tamatea phase is connected to a time of ngata ngaro, is about being aware and being in tune that when we can't see, but we can feel. And so if we look at that in terms of that Tamatea phase, we can make it a wānanga that is at that time, is that our tāne, when they're going through their distress, just as Tāwhiri Mātia did, that they then hide their faces. And they often go into that poor state where you may not see them, but you can feel them. So when you, for example, if you see someone and you go, man, how you doing? How you doing? And then, I'm good. But there's something there. And so when we think of that pūrākau of Tāwhiri Mātia and Ruo Moko, it's about asking deeper questions at this time, especially with our tāne, going, really? Or, trying to plot, because it's often seen as a time when men will hide their emotions and that they just hide their faces. And so we can have a look at we have a look at these names of all these different phases, and they have a whakapapa and a kōrero behind them. So when we have a look at just in this pūrākau or this kōrero of tamatea, doing the whakapapa of the fires of Ruawahia, in there we got ohoata. In ohoata, so it goes tiria, or whiro, tiria, ohoata, which is fire, uinuku, which is frost, and then we go okoro, and then tamatea. Marawa, is that making some sense? It allows us to look at it through the lens of our tipuna versus, this person is anxious, this person anxiety. It's just like, kapai, that's fine. Those are kupu, but what does that? How it allows us to be flexible in our thinking, and then we can go, if they're going through that, what are some of the? Because it's about what are the rituals that are connected to that. And so if we're often, like when we're looking around, we're up north, we're working with a whānau, and paparere I might touch on is when you have someone that's low and they're not talking, we then light a fire and sit around the ahi and connect through mahuika and ruamoko, and then warm them up, and you'll find that by sitting around the fire, it's amazing what a fire can bring out in a conversation. They start opening up because the fire is about drawing up the ka whakapiki te wairua. Or you could go into that tamatea phase, or what's the winds? When it's windy, how do we use ngā hauewha as a healing tool? It allows us to expand, and how do we using the Taiao as our healer, and it could be doing the puri e te hau. Standing on a hill and doing tuku and karakia and just, karanga, haka, and just letting that out and allowing tāwhiri mātea to carry that vibration, that sound. Or it could be playing tonga puoro, using the different oro to connect with tāwhiri mātua, or to open their eyes and to dive deeper through meditation. And I wouldn't say meditation through ori. So we're using our atua and our kōrero, but also weaving in our kete of pukinga. Kapai? So it's ever changing. But what Maramataka is about is that it's not fixated, but it teaches us to adapt quickly to the environment. So we always have to be constantly watching and observing. What? Okay. Well, that's my roundabout answer. Yeah.
So there's 30 moon phases, and for some of us that have been trying to follow all of the ones, and then we get to like those main ones like tamatea, borders, Takonui. We've recently sort of discovered and tried to work alongside of Wairarapa one.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we've said it the wrong way, and Gillian and I have sort of talked about probably see if the feudal moon is rising on the correct thing, maybe. But sometimes we get into like Rako Nui. That's a couple of phases behind or ahead. Yeah. Some things that I know that other iwi and Ruawahia do is drop a couple of phases to sort of make that up. Is that something that you know that happens down this end of the country?
Yeah, they all do it. So when we look at Maramataka, we have to understand that it's a 29.5 day cycle. So every month that goes past, you're going to be out half a day. And then the next month, you're going to be out a whole day. And and that's what was a big challenge if you look through historical kōrero, not just Māori, but a lot of iwi that followed, or Indigenous people when they followed the moon, it's not a true 30-day calendar. So you have to be pulling and putting names in, pulling names out to get it into sync. So if you weren't, that's why if you follow the map app Hina, you'll find that, hey, Maramataka Nui was 2 days ago. It's because you constantly have to be pulling a day out to make it fit. It could be a day, it could be 14 days from Whiro to Rākau Nui, or it could be 15 days or 15 and a half days. So you're always having to adjust and tweak your calendars all the time. And so I always say that's why observations are really key. And what I've always taught is that what you see trumps what you read. Well, that means like on Tangaroa phase, you might read that Tangaroa is a really important phase and that you should be in the water, gathering kai, it's really productive. But you go to the beach and there's 5 meter swells, you don't go and jump in there. So your observation trumps everything. And so you have to, you have to know the Western way of the calendar, because that will fill the gap of the Maramataka. You have to blend the two together. So unless you're watching it and observing the moon and get the full pattern, then you don't need to. But because we haven't got the time, because we've got other lives as well, is that you can use the apps as a guide, and then you know which day to pull out by using an app, because I always tell fun, if you're going to use the app and you're using a moon app, just follow 2 days. When's Whiro, or when's the new moon and when's the full moon. And then you adjust everything else in between. But as long as those are the anchors, if you ever get lost, jump on your app and that will tell you when Whiro is in Rākau Nui, or could be Mutu Whenua and Oturu, depending if you're starting on the day off or the day after. So I would expect it to go out, and it's just adjusting it. So what we would do is maybe pull a tamatea or pull the huna, and on the other side you probably move a kōrero. Just to get it back in, then you're like, flip, I've got to put 2 days in just to get back in sync. Marama?
Can I come back to me then?
Oh, it's kicking.
Is it a right thought that we were not observing the sun, but if we were, not if each moon phase started with the moonrise day, we would take the number of, not call it days, but moons.
Yeah.
So that would be those 29.
Yeah, the thing is we can't measure the 0.5. Yeah.
But I have partly about no. Where is the no? And is it just the Rākau Nui or?
I think there's technically 2 questions, but we'll leave it.
No, Simon wants to ask first.
2 questions and 1. What was the first one? Yeah, I started thinking of the second one before the first one. The first one was about each moon phase, eh?
Well, I think you answered it.
Yeah. You can't measure it. It's hard to measure the 0.5, but it's about being fluid. Because if you look at your app, there'll be a day that there is no moon. because what that means by no moon, it is, but because it's risen before the midnight and then it's set before it's disappeared and it doesn't appear till 1 o'clock the next morning. So it looks like there's this day with no moon. There's no moon, it's still there, but it's just working on the rises. In terms of noho puku, I think noho puku happened a lot more than if we have a look in Te Waru, which is Raumati was, they wouldn't eat much because kai was scarce. Then you have to have a look at why there was kai scarce, because you go back to, or coming up in Ngāhuru was, all the harvests were happening, the kohi tātea, te hui tāngaru. All the kai was being gathered and put into the pātaka, all the smoking of, drying off of shark and all that was being done to put into the pātaka. What I think we sometimes forget is the pātaka had to get us through winter. Hotoke also had to get you through koanga, also had to get you through raumati. But coming raumati, we naturally don't eat much when it's hot. But we've got to make sure that we stay hydrated. Now, noho puku why we say one of the kōrero is whiro, why we do it on whiro, because in one of the kōreros, there's a big battle on Taururangi. Now, Taururangi is one of the rangis. So just like rangi nui, rangi tamaku, rangi parau, as you go up to about level 6, I think it is, the 6th rangi is called Taururangi, or Ururangi. And on there, this big war broke out. And the battle is known as the Te Pakanga Ururangi, is where whiro tried to capture and stop Tāne from getting Ngāketi o Te Wānanga. But on this rangi, tū mātaonga and rongo turned up. Tū mātaonga, the atua of war, and rongo, the atua of peace, turned up this battle in time, and whiro was attacking, this ope, was attacking Tāne. But when tū mātaonga and rongo turned up, the focus came on them, because these two atua were both very skilled in battle, in warfare. And in this one, whiro threw a mākutu at tū mātaonga. And tū mātaonga got hit so bad that tū mātaonga, oh, ka mate ai. This is it, I'm gone. And it was because the mākutu that whiro threw was a puku disease. And this ngārara that got into tū mātaonga's puku, that whiro then, tū mātaonga collapsed. And it was rongo that came in and fought and defended tū mātaonga. And in this karakia, tū mātaonga rongo said, I've got you. And ka tū ake au I runga I a koe tū mātaonga. Here I am, I'm going to stand over you. And ka puta mai te wai o rongo, is that then rongo then mimied on tū mātaonga. And so that's when rongo then cemented rongo self as the atua of healing. But that's where the philosophy is, whenever you get a cut, mimi on it. So that's the origins of this is, and my karawa, cut yourself, the first answer you get is, just mimi on it. If you get a sore throat, mimi on it. You get a sty, mimi on it. I wouldn't recommend it, but and use your own. No. But what they're talking about is that whiro is the atua of puku disease. And the studies show that if you noho puku at least a complete, when I talk about noho puku, it's a kai a wai. And when you noho puku, it allows the iro or the whiro that is in your puku to clean. So when we look at whiro is the atua of puku disease, and it's also the atua of death. So when we noho puku, the atua that, anyone know who the atua was that created the puku? It's also rongo. Rongo is the atua, rongo marairo was the atua that created the puku. And so when you start looking at all the whānau of rongo are all the sensory atua. So when you have a look at rongo mai taha nui, rongo mai taha nui, rongo mai taha rangi, rongo marairo, is that then you know that your puku is your greatest, when we talk about pou puku, we're talking about it's your greatest intuition. Our wahine so intuitive because it comes from the pou puku, which is they have this gut feeling, and which is far more in tune than our men. Because when we get hungry, we decimate, man, we fall apart. But our wahine, when they're talking about something, they know when something is pono and tika, because of the intuition that each and our wahine have. So whiro is the atua that attacks our puku. So when we noho puku, and we don't eat, and we don't have kai, it allows our puku and our intestines to clean. And when we clean, what's the name of the atua? Te Rangitīne, no, well, that is something else, is that it cleans the walls. And then when it cleans the walls, in that 24 hours, it flushes it out. So why we said when whiro, why we do it at whiro is that we do it on mutu whenua. Mutu whenua is meaning to stop and connect to the whenua, or it could be mean to stop eating kai. So when we noho puku, what we then, it totally relates with the kōrero of whiro to allow our puku to cleanse, so that on the whiro moon, we are healing our puku versus continuously eating. But and also, noho puku can also be done in the kore phases. In the kore phases of our Maramataka, known as kore te whiwhia, kōrero te rawea. And that has a specific narrative around Tāne's failings. So that time was around when Tāne went and saw Io. When Tāne came back, Tāne wanted to create a wahine. But in Tāne trying to create that, failed. So when we look at kore te whiwhia, it means the time of to pursue nothing. Kore te rawea, it means nothing to celebrate. What that kōrero is, and it comes back to Mātarahunga's book, is that Tāne was trying to create wahine but failed. Wasn't able to achieve it. And Tāne became quite distressed about that because because Tāne wasn't able to do it. But what we, out of Tāne's failings, the first creation of Tāne was, what's her name? Hene Kahurangi, and Hene Waiapu, and Hene Kokorangi, Hene Tupare Maunga, was all the rocks were formed. And those rocks were created, and because Tāne wasn't able to create wahine but created these kōhatu, Tāne saw there was nothing to celebrate and nothing to achieve. But at the same time, that's a good time to noho puku, because our tupuna at that time would take these times that were Tāne's failings and nothing to achieve, but they are great times to slow down, noho puku, and repurpose the things that we're working on. Whether that be our mātou, our kupenga, the fixing the nets, they would take time to sharpen their tools. So it wasn't seen as, people say kore is a time of nothing, But kōrero was a time of preparation and intentional preparation. So there was another time that they would, the kōreros, that there would be noho puku done at that time. So noho puku is about elevating our wairua to the next level. So when our tipuna saw a tohu, whether that be a particular whetū that's sort of like, I need to ponder on that, or they saw a auahi tūroa, a comet, they would say, he aha te tohu. And then they would open up a noho puku and they will fast on that. Even to here around Paoro Patangaroa, we've seen a particular tohu, was it 3 days? Went and noho puku'd on it. And then came out and gave the kōrero and the vision once he saw the tohu. But sometimes we go, the star here, or Te Waiwaka, death. We jump too fast into the answers about, okay, I saw that tohu, let's go and wānanga. And noho puku puts you into that state of letting go of the physical being and going into the wairua being and searching and receiving answers a wairua. Ka pai? Oh, yeah. Papai?
My patai is around more a practicality thing. So I work in the Taiao space, and what we've been trying to do is match Maramataka to our flood data information, as well as like the pika that we talked about, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I guess my question is around through that, because you talked about how moon risings and settings do not match Gregorian days. So we've been very particular about collecting some of that data of moon rising and moon setting, so that we can match it up and then match it to our marama here in the Wairarapa. But I guess it was just, would you recommend utilising paper or spreadsheets? Or I'm a little bit nervous to put everything on Microsoft and Google because of AI trawling at the moment. But I guess just if you had some recommendations, or just what you use, or there's a lot that sits up in our heads too when we have kōrero, and I'm a little bit nervous. I mean this in a good way, but if we ever get hit by buses, that, it'll be about 30 buses that we need, but, that we don't lose this for our next generation, because we're trying to trawl back what our aunties and uncles have somewhat lost through no fault of their own sometimes. And how do we make sure that we pass it down to the next generation without having to give everything in a kōrero? And maybe how do we do our next series of manuscripts? Or just a small
that's a
question.
cool one.
Sorry.
I'm a big paper person. I don't quite trust. I do everything by paper, because that's what works for me. But if I work with my mate, she just goes, as a genius on the computer. I'm like, flip, how the heck did you do that? Because I'm just a pen and paper. We'll keep it nice and simple. One of the ways of passing that mātauranga down is recreating new waiata. And when you have a waiata, you have coded words in there. And so you can tell about the flood, but put it into a waiata, they're just these particular words, but there's a deeper meaning to it. So there's a whole wānanga that goes with that kōrero. Often we always use te ori or tū tere moana. It can answer everything. I even down to like I think it's the third verse, because we were sort of talking about, because it talks about the one of the lines that goes, te roro haka ki te ngā rangi, goes kai ki te ngā rangi ngā huru mārua I konei e tama e. And talking about the arrival of Tāne to the 12th heaven. But in that, there was a verse, and this is going back a couple of years ago, when we had the floods in Kahununu, or it would have come all the way down here. But then that third verse, and then it sort of transformed that third verse. If you read it, it goes, I karanga tia tāne nui e rangi ki huru tia rangi. Ka noho ia tonga nui kaia. And if you had a look, you would have seen, heard the trumpeting winds come. Tonga nui kaia is talking about the trumpeting winds. And if you had a look, the sky turned white with the moon. And then huru tia rangi, ka noho ia tāwhiri, tonga nui ka noho ia huru tia rangi. Ka noho ia tonga nui kaia nāna ko parawera nui. Ka noho ia tāwhiri mā te ka tukuna mai tāna whānau. Titi paruri, titi matangi nui, titi matakaka, ka tangi mai te haumāpū, ka tangi mai te roro hau. Ka eke tia ngā rangi ngā huru mārua I konei. And so when that storm was happening was in the 12th month of the calendar, of the Maramataka. And when you look at Titi Parauri and Titi Matangi Nui, they're talking about the hurricane winds, the stormy winds, the gloomy winds that struck at that time on, and when we're talking about it, is the 12th month, but it now is like, the 12th heaven. But when I looked at it and looked at it like, this is just described what just happened in our Taiao right in this moment. So in the waiata, it's adaptable mai rā no, it's adaptable now, which will then sort of go, well, when you look at that kōrero, what they're talking about is when Tāne was on tiritiri o mātangi, in order to get to the next level, the haua, all those winds had to combine to make sure that journey was possible. So it's about, when I look at, and in that moment when it was this noho puku and kōrero, because I had to make a big call for mahi atua. And if you go back to when was it, 2-3 years ago, we knew 5 days before it was coming that it was going to be a big storm. So I rang up Davina, she's just tragically passed away last year, Davina Thompson. I rang her up and I said, did you see the tohu? And she goes, no. And I said, this storm's going to be big. So she was at a big national competition. As soon as I said it was going to be a big storm, she jumped on the plane and shot back at home. On that Saturday, I rang up Mark and Diane. I said, hey, the tohu is too strong. We're going to have to I recommend shutting the wānanga down. And all that was going through my mind was that ori tū tere moana. And then I looked at the tohu, because then I saw toro in Auckland. I don't know why you see a toro in Auckland coming in. We saw seagulls all on the lands. When I saw it, the moon was like full on. You could see the kura haupō was this big ring around it. And then the next day there was also a kura haupō around the sun. It was huge. But we call that te whatu a io, which is the eye of io. And I was like, we saw that ringing around trying to validate, but no one else saw it. And I go to Mark and Taiao, cancel the wānanga. So we went live, and then they're like, oh, Riki's got an announcement to make. And this is on the Saturday. This is 5 days before it even hit. And I said, we're going to cancel the wānanga. And then at the same time, I was like, I've just cost Mark and Dai all this pūtea, but it was like, trust the tohu that we saw. And so we cancelled it on the Sunday. On the Saturday, everyone was supposed to be there on Sunday to start on Monday. And when we cancelled, Gisborne was actually closed down for that wānanga. There was no one getting into Gisborne. There was no one getting out of Gisborne. And we would have had about 80 to 100 people from all over the motu in this wānanga. And we were one of the only ones that cancelled the wānanga. So it's hard to predict because it's only in the moment. It's like, I don't know if I could predict another one 5 years out from now, but it was in those 4 days before, 5 days before it even happened, the tohu were pretty clear. So you mark those down in your journals and rewrite it as a narrative. Does it make, not that it answers your question, but it,
No,
yeah, specifically,
it gave me what I needed. So
yeah, yeah. Kapai?
Mine's just a clarification, and it might be one of those silly questions.
Oh, no. It's not.
When you're marking when the lunar phases are, is it from the moonrise to moonset? Because earlier you were saying about sunrise to sunset, so I was...
So on a fetal moon, that one is from the sunrise to the sunset, because the moon rises with the sun. So I could say moon rises when the sun rises, and the moon sets when the sun sets on the fetal moon.
On the fetal moon, yeah.
Tapai?
Mm-hmm.
And so Rākau Nui is that the moon will rise when the sun is setting. They're the opposite
Right,
each other.
yep.
And the moon will set
Mhm.
when the sun rises.
Yep.
But on a tamatia and the tangaro, it's when the sun is it's Popotanga, about the noonday sun.
Mm-hmm.
Then the moon will rise from the middle of the day to the middle of the night. Tangaro is the other way around, from the middle of the night to the middle of the day. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Kia ora. I don't know if this is a pātai, but a little planting he kākano. Have you considered doing like a puka puka to capture all your tohu, all that mātauranga, mō ngā mokopuna, mō ngā uri whakaeke, like just because we talk about pūrākau and how we share that, but wanting to share it with our tamariki, like how can we do that?
I think Mahi Atua is releasing a whole lot of children books that we were working on. No, I haven't written anything. Actually, when I come to writing, I am korotake as.
Or how do you implement it into your own whānau, with your
In my
own
own
tamariki?
whānau, I just tell them, and they don't like listening to me.
Oh.
You know, even it was quite funny, because my kids just like, they wouldn't dare, they wouldn't sit here. I've taken them on Wānanga, and they're just like, and then they'll leave, or they'll just cause me trauma. But it was quite funny, because I went out and we're doing star stuff, and then my daughter don't listen, but she'll go, oh yeah, there's puanga tau. She knows, she can go out there and read them. But when she was younger, didn't want anything to do with me or the Maramataka. So I have been intending to write puka puka. My wife did one, school books. And I was supposed to do one with Huia, and I was sort of talking about these ideas, and she just wrote it. Another mate's a publisher rang up and said, oh, can you write some books? And I said, nah. So she asked her, and she wrote them. And then I was like, I was supposed to be writing these books for Huia, not right for him. But yeah, so she's written a couple of little Maramataka books. But I'd like to write up a whole series of Taiao, but also the whakapapa. That's what I love, is that you have to wholeheartedly believe in our tupuna. And I won't budge from that.
Sounds familiar.
So it's like I think if we get into the whakapapa and you learn the whakapapa of that's probably, that in there holds a lot of the narratives in the pūrākau in there.
I have a pātai. So recently we've been talking about the names of the kaupeka e ai ki a Mātauranga, Āti Mātauranga, and been trying to look into possible different reasonings behind the ingoa. Like I know that the kaupika that Rangitāne uses are all marked by, you know, the rising of certain whetū. So recently I've observed, and I think Mahirangi's observed it too, and that started from Whiro, the rising of Ruawahia, here rising in the eastern horizons in the early mornings. Do you know anything about that whetū?
Ruawahia.
Yeah.
I have assumptions.
Ish.
It's not one of my strong knowledges.
Yeah.
The Mātarahonga's kaupeka.
Yeah.
I know some of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know all of them.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like potentially related to the particular kaupeka that we're in at the moment, but
Yeah.
I kind of took it as maybe that's a tohu to say that that is the whetū for this particular kaupeka. Yeah.
Yep, it would be, because if you look at it in his calendar, he's got te tata urutahi and te tata uru ora.
Mm.
And what's the one before that? Mutu. Gee.
I've got them.
Aonui.
Aonui is the first month.
Yeah, I have to have a look at it. But te tata urutahi and te tata uru ora, if you have a look at it, if you go in this puka, wrong book. I'm looking at a thing of Taki Timu. But if you have a look in Mātaronga's book, he talks about te pairangi.
Mm.
And te pairangi's when?
Mm.
He talks about winter. Is that te pairangi is the battle of Ngā Tua. And if you have a look at the journey of Mata Ora, because you got Taiao, which is also known as Taiao Tūro. Then the next moteri is te pairangi, which is the battles of Ngā Tua. Te tāheke roa, which is the long descent, which is when winter's at its most depth, the descent. Then the next moteri after that is te tata urutahi and te tata uru ora. And so te tata urutahi is the doorway of the single doorway, and te tata uru ora is the doorway of health. And these are all whetū. And so those names we have in there are names of stars. And we're just slowly just picking that apart. So I know that they are whetū. It's sort of like you got to spend. So I know, and it's just spending time. That's why I'd say it's an assumption, because I can't definitely say it is, but it's highly likely it could be, just by judging by the tohu. But I need to spend more time with it, even down to ones like Hene Rakatauri is a whetū. Hene Rau Katamea is a whetū. Hene Rau, what's it? Hene Rau Amo is a whetū. What makes Hene Rau Amo so special, because it's seen as one of the most prestigious whetū, is because from Hene Rau Amo you get Hene Putahui. Is the hui grow according to the star. Then you have Hina Te Iwa comes off that star as well. And then also you have Hene Hinu Tohu, who is the Atua of Rongoa, comes off that whetū. So there's a whole lot of whakapapa that comes off this Hene Rau Amo. And then you look at all the kōrero, then you start saying, in these kōrero and whakapapa, they rise at particular times, which are then a hene rakatauri would align with the case moth. And so you start lining up that of that type of kōrero. So Ruawahia, it is one I've been looking at, trying to figure out why are you so important.
Because I feel that there's a reason, but don't know.
Yeah, I think it's got a real strong connection for here to Kahanunu, Ruawahia. My whakaro is it has to do something around that late November-ish, early November, December.
Nā koe.
But that might be, I don't want to say anything, and then it goes out, and then you're like, Riki said.
Nah. He said ish.
Ish, and next one they're like, where did you get that from? But that's a wānanga, that's like a speculative wānanga. And then we try and research that all out. There's other kōrero around Ruawahia as well. Arcturus is really important.
Kia ora.
Mine's a bit different. So we've talked about stars and the moon and the sun. I'm more interested about the clouds, understand the clouds and the names of the clouds and the Maramataka. Like I know I look at the clouds, I can read cirrus, cumulus, stratus and know when it's going to be rain, where it's coming from, and I'm sure our tupuna would have as well. It's all part of the. And I'd like you to expand on that for me.
Clouds are not my strong suit. Mine is pretty simple.
Yep.
And it's a kōrero that has to, well, I'll just tell a pūrākau around it. Because the atua that of clouds is this, that I know of, there's two of them, which is Tū Te Kapua and Te Māmaru. And Te Māmaru, both of these, they live in, what is it? Oh, where do they live? Not Te Tini o Poto, Po Taiao, which means they reside up in the heavens. So there's a collective of Tihorangi resides there, which is the atua of rain. Tāwhiri Mātea, Tāwhiri Rangi, they reside in this Po Taiao. But also come off that is the mists and the fog. They come off there and they're a part of that. Now some of the names of them is Hene Pukohurangi. Hene Pukohurangi is one that we call the atua of fog. There's Hene Wai, which is, in our kōrero, comes off, so when you're looking at a wave and you see that mist coming off the waves at the top, is Hene Wai. And if you have a look on a lake or a river and you see the fog just sitting on that water, on the lake, is known as Hene Taire. But then there's one out of the ocean which is called Hene Mākohurangi. And Hene Mākohurangi is the evaporation of the ocean and then creating the clouds. The Hene Mākohurangi is the evaporation process when the heat and the sun, and so that water evaporates up, then they become known as, one of the kōrero is known as Te Waka Maru, which are the small clouds. And they're like little boats, little waka. Then another kōrero, and then they're okay, but when they join together, they become known as,
Big clouds.
They become known as Te Rotoa Maru, which is the big rain cloud, the Great Lakes of Maru, Mamaru. And then there's an exchange between these great clouds, between them and Tihorangi. And Tihorangi is the atua that activates and allows them to fall back down to earth, as the rain. And that's about as much as I know on clouds. Oh, mind you, there's other ones called Te Kupinga Taramainuku. I don't know the English name of it, but it looks like a kumara garden. And that's the one that, if it covers the whole, they look like rows and rows of kumara. Yeah. So they're known as Te Kupinga Taramainuku, which is a tohu that is rain.
My mum taught me about the clouds, and she taught me to look up, and she said, when they look like that, like really high up in the there's a lot of wind. In 2 days we'll have a lot of wind.
Yeah.
And how to and about the ones that are low down, then that's low to push. They're bringing us rain. You know, just how to read the signs. And with the wind, it's if you're going anywhere out towards the coast, you'll know what it's going to be like. So that's just always been interested in clouds.
I think my cloud has got tainted when I was in Hawaii. They talk about pig clouds, dog clouds. So if the pig is chasing the dog, then it's rain.
Yeah.
And if the dog is chasing the pig, it's going to be windy.
Yeah. Well, here we are similar, but it's just got a different kind of slant. But it's and then my mum said, you can see the hills close up, it's raining.
Yeah.
If they look far away, it's good. So it's just those things you learn as kids.
And so that's why I don't know the names of the clouds. There's a heaps of names of them, but it's like, well, which one's which?
That's another question.
Yeah. I got some manuals that got all the names. I got the books from Hawaii that's got 700 different names of rain and clouds.
Mine was more based around with the progression of technology, computers, and I work with predominantly with kids. It's really hard to engage interest into Taiao in the younger generations of today. I don't know if you work with many youth and stuff like that, but any suggestions on how to bring them into the fold, I guess you would call it? Because gauging interest out of 8 to 12-year-olds is pretty hard. So any suggestions on how we can get them a little bit more interested in the Maramataka?
Oh, that's a good one, eh? Because it's all about gaming these days. They'll have their home problem in my own house. But, yeah, getting them engaged, I work with a few rangatahi. One of the things that we did that shifted a lot of them is we took them up into the Ngā, or down in Ruawahia, there's called Hakiri Matas. And we thought we would take them we drove down from Auckland and we got there at 9 p.m. at night, 10 p.m. at night, so it's pitch black. And we just went through a hikoi up the Hakiri Matas in the dark. And the amount of moaning that we got all the way there was, we started with the karakia down the bottom and then we started making our way up. And we just turned the light on, find the stairs, and then just gradually just take our time. Then we got up to the top, and before we went up to the top, a lot of magic happens in the dark. When they got there, there was a ruru there that was karangi. You know, just karanged them there. They were just like, oh, what is this? And then what we did is we sent them out into the ngahere by themselves up the top, and they just had to sit in the dark. And when they sat in the dark, I was playing tonga pūoro. And when these were all, they were all Maui, all Maui. The word haututu, yeah, I think we say they're mischief, but haututu is they're curious. So these rangatai are curious. And when we played the tonga pūoro and then just let them, then went into the te pō where they just sat there for about 20 minutes and then we invited them back in. And man, it was powerful. Because when they come back in, they then shared what happened in that experience with them. Some of them said my karawa turned up. They all had these powerful men. And they shifted. They were, in that moment, they were never the same as when they came all the way down. They were talking about gaming and all that. When we finished, they were talking about their whole thought process had changed in about 2 hours. And that was allowing them to sit in the port, because it's in the darkness is when your greatest growth happens, because we try and do everything in the light. But when we take because in the port, I did a little kōrero on it just before Christmas, that the port, and then it was funny because someone came back at me, no, it's light, and hydroponics proves that wrong. It's like, well, our people never had hydroponics back then. But what it was is that when you have a seed, he kākono, no matter if we put it on the concrete and we put it in the lights, it won't grow. It has to have some form of dark.
The germination's take place.
And so what we're doing is that when our rangatahi is when they go into te pō, we don't give them the tools to sit in te pō. We often get to say that te pō is bad. It has this real negative connotation. Te pō, if we sit there with our kākano, we put them in the ground, that seed will, ko te pū, ko te more, ko te weu. And what they're saying is, when it's in the ground, under the dirt in te pō, the taproot root will come out. But then that root has to go further into te pō. It has to keep driving down. And not driving up. The deeper they go into te pō, the stronger they are in te aka. And so it's about, so it goes down, and until that root is set, it comes back up. But sometimes with our rangatahi, we don't, or even people now these days, we take them to, that's why we set up in Auckland our space, is that when they go into te pō, Western world is to give them a pill. But we say, just push through what you're going through, the challenge, because in your darkness, that's where your gem is hidden. So what we have to do is really nurture them and guide them through that te pō. So what we try and do is take our rangatahi out into te pō, because it's in the darkness that it's silent, it's lonely, but then at the same time, they grow. I think a lot of those kids went on to do some pretty cool stuff. Mechanics, when I'm talking about mechanics and engineering and builders, they weren't heading that way. They're going to be the next. So we try and take them into that te pō, because it's in the dark that they need to learn how to grow too. That's just a whakaaro.
Oh, I like it. Thank you, Brad.
Well, we look at our tupuna did all their karakia in this te pō. Taiao, they'll be working. Wairarapa will be up at like 5. Karakia.
Mahi, Brad. Thank you. What's that, Brad?
Yeah, mine was about the noho as well. But yeah, I'm interested on one mananga Tane was talking about, actually how the day was broken down into each hour. Like there was a, like a Maramataka of the day sort of thing. Like each hour had a certain thing that you'll be doing at certain times of the day. And
Well, if you look at most Maramataka, they'll have. It was around the kai mara and gathering kai. So fishing is good until the noonday. So they would what we're trying to get is that it was a strategic plan about optimizing and maximizing the opportunity. So that's what we often think about. Maramataka was a strategy, because over time they had realised, okay, the best time to go out on this moon or this day is before before the sun rises. This time is okay to go out if we go out up to the noonday. This one here is that you won't go out until after the sunrise. And different Maramataka have different kōrero. If you break them down, you'll see them when they specifically know that. Now, I'm trying. That question was asked to me before because I did a wānanga about 10 years ago on the different time dimension of the different names. And 10 years later, I've forgotten. Because I probably only done it one or a couple of times. And then they asked me if I could remember it, and I couldn't because I put in so much other stuff. But I think it's if I can get some key words, then it will trigger that little memory box. And sometimes when I hear a word, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. But I can't remember any of the words. So in terms of what specific days it is I don't know yet. And when I do, I'll bring it back. So I'm trying to think who would remember them. Oh, the names of I'm trying to remember all the names of the different parts of the sun.
Te ata pō,
Hmm?
te haparas, all of those parts.
Yeah.
I can't remember them either, sorry.
Yeah.
Only some.
No.
Part-time.
Did your question get answered?
There is a whole passage in, I can't remember if it's Maramataka's puka or the mahupuku one, where it talks about the different names of running as every morning and turning over.
Yeah. And then it's got all the different stages that Rangi went through. I think it won't be Mātaurahongas. I don't think it's that one. Must be the other one.
Yeah, mahupuku did a whakapapa.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Husband was like his astronomical time.
Okay, so I thought of a apartheid. I don't use an app, but if I was going to, what would you recommend? Can you recommend one?
For what is it you want?
Just overall, really.
Just like for the moon?
Mm.
The one I tell everyone to download is called The Moon.
Easy to remember.
Why? Because you got some. Why I say the moon is because all I'm looking for in that app is the new moon and the full moon, and then you can use it for your own maramataka.
Mm.
So if you go hina, that's Te Whanapanui. If you go this other one, Mātaitai, I think it's called. That's just up the road there, Maniapoto. Yeah, so then you, so I always say use the moon and then layer that. Now, if you want to use for Whetu, learn stars, there's an app called Stellarium, and you can change it into Māori. Stella.
What was that one for the star story, bro?
Stellarium. Stella as in Stella. Rium. Rium. Then you can put and some of them are, well, depends on who ones you're following, but those stars can be adapted. Oh, the stars are in Māori. Come on. And for tides, you can use, I have another, there's another app called Sunrise, Sunset. You can use that just to figure out the sun. You can download a tide app, the tides, and then just link them all together.
What was the title one, bro?
Just NZ Tides.
Use it at the official post is very good. Taiao, Maramataka Ngā.
Who wrote that one?
I've just got the. I think it's got a few pictures. But it has Koinga Maramataka Atua
Oh, Te Rauora did it. Yeah.
It's
Yes, they just released their app in the last few weeks.
But it's got a few glitches.
Yeah.
Like you have to log in and but it's got some really good things. Here's the Hua Aranga assessment, so you just check each day so you can keep it. It's got everything you want. To the degree if you're working for help in the room, it does have a few glitches. But it does have Taiao. Explore it, have fun.
Yeah. The other one I highly recommend is just walk out there and look up.
And that add up. That requires one.
Yeah, it requires some YY. Because what we don't want to become is app dependent. So while I'm trying not to give too much, but just use the app as a guide to go outside. So if we have a look at the sun, Tamanui Te Rā is the keeper of seasons. Hina Marama is the keeper of the days. And Ngā Whetua are the keepers of months. And if you look at it from that, is the world's greatest app that was ever made. And so a lot of whānau I work with, they stop going outside, but they use apps and paper. Your biggest teacher is going to be what you do outside of the whare. And even if it's just waking up in the morning, going out just before the sun rising, look to the east, look to the west, and just mark that, just draw that, what you see in the horizon. It doesn't have to be spending all night there. You just get a little snap. Then you try and try and catch the moon. Play a game with where can I see the moon? Where's Hina? And then you start learning her pattern. Then you can go, when she's rising there, is that high tide? Yeah. Or is when she's setting, is that low tide? And you start mapping that all together. So then you can go, if you're at the beach, you can go, oh, it's low tide, moon's over there. High tide, she's coming up. So then you can and that's how tupuna did it. They just studied the tohu and then collaborated it together.
Pretty much completely observation. I mean, overall, that's what that I'm getting out of it. Very direct, you've got to be paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in an organisation, you go back from this one this way to share is that, instead of going failure but what do you recommend as an overall organisation and an effective and
Yeah, well, we have, for those that might have done Mahi Atua, we use what we call and it's a real simple framework, is instead of saying today is tamatia, or let's say today is takido, and this is what it is. We can say tonight is takido. And the kōrero with takido from our tūpuna is that it's 100 take on the table. And what that takido mai rā nō mean is known as the rau kumara. And rau kumara means 100 kumara. And rau kumara were the small kumara. And the small kumara were given as koha to those that were visiting because they were easy to carry. It was sort of like giving a maroba mai rā nō, or it was something small and they could pardon? Yeah, bite size. It was just there as a your lollies mai rā nō, eh? And when we were driving, we have a packet of lollies that disappears, or that was the rau kumara, little sweeties that you could eat. So
The little peppermints.
and so then you can go. Now it says that this time is a good time to work on small things, because a rau kumara can be created by, is that if we plant during rākau nui, we're going to end up with more leaf and less and smaller kai. But they were designed that way so that they could be a koha. So then the pātai then can go from there is, so from my observation, I observed on this marama that I was this way. Does it make sense? Yeah. Also, yeah. So you can go, so we call it observations. I observed what I saw, I observed what I heard, I observed.
I've observed that the moon,
Yeah.
it's like a big golden disc.
Yeah. And then I observed that I was feeling a bit lost at this time. I observed I got tired. Or I observed that I became more productive.
Because the other side of one is that if you preempt the low energy, the high energy, and this and this, then you're planting the seed.
Yeah.
And so forth. Which is, I don't think that's how the Maramataka
Was
designed.
Yeah. What in, yeah, that's where it's gone.
That's where it goes. Because in Western worlds, other worlds, we have horoscopes. You know, if you're born in a certain month, that's how us Aquarians deal. That's what, that's
Have you met us?
And do we have that in the knowledge?
I don't think we did.
No.
But what allowed, because that's what we call, as mātauranga has become, you'll see, like they're saying, someone's, I'll do yoga at this time. Like, well, mate, I don't know, we never had yoga. But it's been adapted. And I don't think it was intended to be that way. But it's sort of gone that way because of the knowledge that was there.
Is that part of our colonization?
I think it's in.
Two worlds,
Yeah.
pushing it.
Progression, change.
Yeah, it's called change. Karongo te pō, karongo te ao. If you go back to that whakatauki, karongo te pō, karongo te ao is the integration of tawhito knowledge and new knowledge together. Yeah.
And there'll be balances and we'll go from one end to the other and while we find our way.
It's about, as a hapu, what is it that we wanted to get? As an iwi, what are we creating for our Maramataka? I don't think they've shifted. Our observations have. Yeah. So the tohu are showing up differently. Are they showing up differently? Or are they arriving when they're meant to? Yeah.
I'm still tied up in the Gregorian
Yeah. Because that's what, yeah, so it's like, oh, this one came late. No, it didn't.
I think because we had this little bit of a kōrero as well, because I feel like it's preparing itself for that 13th month as well. And so we're saying it's slipped, but actually it's not. Taiao's meant to do what it's going to do.
Because if we have a look at it, the Taiao's shifting backwards and forwards all the time. Yeah. It's like, yeah, no, it's just raumati.
Yeah, I had a pātai. So a few of us were in Rangi's course Te Tau Toru Nui o Matariki.
Yeah.
And I guess he touched on it real lightly, and I guess I'd be interested in your whakaaro around he was talking about some of the ceremonies, but it was more just a general statement in passing. He didn't go into too much detail. So us as a whānau and a hapu have started to hold little, we're trying to bring everyone together during whiro to come and welcome the new rising of new whetū. But I guess just what your experience with this is, does your whānau do those types of things? What are the pūrake that you're aware of how we used to welcome in the different whetū? Yeah.
Okay, one of my big ones is that I finally got invited home. They went everywhere else and asked everyone else. But the kōrero, we did a hautapu there, and they were like, and they were doing, they just as Rangi did, you got to cook kai. But in our tikanga, is that no cooked kai should ever be offered to an atua. And that's just our kōrero, because an atua does not eat cooked kai. And so, I'm not saying that it's because it's all about the kohu, but when I went home and they did the hautapu, the fire and the kai, I said, hey, kia koutou, I'm not going to say what's wrong and what's right. But a kaumātua said, they said the last time this happened was in the late 1960s, that they were doing hautapu in the cold mornings outside lighting fires and doing karakia. And I go, oh, when was that? Because he said, I was only a young boy, I was about 15. And the last person to do it there was my karawa. And I said, that must have been about 1966, 67. And then they said, then he stopped doing them. And I sort of thought back, and I reading through my nan's journals. And then he converted into Christianity. And I was like, oh, that's why he stopped, because he would have been told, stop doing that Māori voodoo witchcraft stuff. But what I do know is that when we celebrated, Matariki was on the set. The setting is when Matariki is going down, ka toa Matariki, ka tuku ngā mate. So we would tuku then. And then when it rised, we're celebrating the new waka back. And because so that's what ka toa atu te a Matariki, ka rere atu ngā mate. But when it rise, we would celebrate the rising as a new beginning. So there's this one, then there was another one that we would do before we even did our karakia for the gardening. There was a gardening one. So taka mai, ko koe, hei whakaronotia, mā kuru ai ngā kākano. There's karakia that we would do in the morning before spring. There was karakia that we would do, which is, it's a waiata. Kātahi ti, kārua ti, noho mai. Those are all karakia about clearing the frosts. And when that karakia was done, it was to say, hey, this is the end of the frosts. If you have a look in books, there's a space right in there before spring, and it's called Aroaro Mahana. And Aroaro Mahana is in between winter and spring. And Aroaro Mahana talks about the aroha of rangi nui kia papa tuanuku, that after all that wars and battles and the pakanga had happened, that their relationship was starting to warm up again. So that what the Aroaro Mahana is, the pathway to warmth. And that's a phase that sits just between koanga, because koanga is when pipi whārero return, ka tangi te pipi whārero, ka timata ngāhuru, koanga, mahuru. So we would do karakias before then. We would do karakia for the heke tuna. for to bid them their farewell. So there was these, at the particular times of the year, we would do different karakia. And it was more so just to acknowledge the Taiao and its creation, to acknowledge farewell the kuaka, farewell the pipi whārero, farewell the kokoia. Yeah, so we would have, I know that my karaua used to do it, but when he became a bishop and everything, a lot of that stopped. But he would talk about it, teach it. But we would go out before the gardening season, do our karakia, so that we could have great crops, no frost. Even to the point where all the Te Hauke, I said, are we going to plant our gardens? He said, no, not yet. I'm like, well, why not? He's because normally, and he's like, no, everyone else had planted. And he goes, not yet. And when he did, what happened was a frost came in and wiped out all the pumpkins and everyone's gardens throughout the thing. And he said, oh, no, not, before that, he's like, no, not yet, the time's not right. I'm just waiting for a bird. And that's when I learned about the kokoia. So ka tangi, or one of the kōrero was, ka tangi te pipi whārero ka timata māhuru, is that at the song of the pipi whārero, māhuru begins. Ka tangi te koikoia ka timata te mara. But we don't hear the kokoia. Now, anyone familiar with the kokoia? It's the cousin of the pipi whārero. And we don't hear them as, I've heard them in Rotorua and around Gisborne, but I don't hear them in around us anymore. And they arrived not long after the kuaka arrived. And so what he was saying, waiting for this bird, because when it comes, the frosts are definitely over. And so everyone else's crops got wiped, and then that next week he was like, we're planting. So he was always, and that was not till about November. So when getting a frost at the end, October was unheard of, it was unusual, but he knew this particular year that there was going to be frost and not to plant until it hit. So it's all totally observations. Whew. Oh, did I even answer your question? Yeah. Ka pai.
I'm mindful of the time whānau, and I know that some people need to shoot off. I do have some feedback forms, if we could just quickly complete those, and then if we just meet up the front for photo. If that's okay, yeah? And then we'll do our closing karakia and stuff like that.
Ka pai. Lovely. Sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. Whoa, look. Down too much.
That's my friend. I'll get the name.
Oh, yeah. Have one, please. Thank you.